Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is a very realistic reminder that it's not always best to go outside into the wilderness and the forests and woods of our world, be that in a group and sometimes more so alone or unarmed. I think you guys are going to enjoy this story tonight. I hope you do. Please do let me know down below in the comments. Of course, guys, please do like and share. Your support is really welcome. And if you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with all the DMT stories that come out. Without further ado, guys, let's get into tonight's story, entitled Something's Up in the Lime Ridge Hills. Let's get straight into that. Hey, no sleep. This past week I went for a solo hike through British Columbia's interior. The area that I hiked around goes by the name of Lime Ridge, located within Marble Range Provincial Park. The area I hiked around in is easily viewable on most maps and is located between Jesmond and Clinton. A few years back, the area was ravaged by a forest fire and looked quite unique. Almost all of the trees are burnt, leaving only their charred husks and the undergrowth that has started to return post-fire. The trees have burned in such a way that almost distorts your vision and makes you think you're seeing things in between them. I caught myself quite a few times looking through the trees, swearing I saw something just outside of my vision. Despite it being easily found on a map, that does not mean it's easily accessible by car or even by foot. There isn't many roads in the area, and the ones that exist are goat trails at best. There are a few people that live in the area, but to my knowledge they keep themselves to themselves and don't like visitors. The remoteness, among other things, is what drew me out into this exploring these hills. There's very few places left, like where I live, that are as unexplored and untouched by civilization as these hills. To attest to the remoteness, I was only aware of one trail up into these hills. The rest of it is steep marble cliff with several hundred foot drops. Along with these cliffs, there are steep valleys that if someone fell into, they would have one hell of a time getting out of. In addition to the remoteness drawing me in, I was also enticed by the mystery surrounding the area. According to some news stories, at least a few hikers have gone missing. They only found some, and those that were found were wedged in crevices and caves with no reason that they should have been there in the first place. I wasn't really one to be spooked by stuff like that, but hey ho. I assumed there was a logical explanation to all of this. Dumb city folk and wannabe rock climbers come up from Vancouver all the time and get lost and die all over British Columbia. As someone with a background in search and rescue, that was something I was damn sure of. I almost considered these hills a test of my mettle. With the skills and gear that I had, it would be a decent challenge to spend a week hiking the hills, take some photos, see some critters, get a tan, and come back with the cool stories for a cute girl I like. For reference, my gear consisted of my bag, a sleeping roll, a tent, rations for 1 week, an axe, and my Bluetooth speaker. It was supposed to be simple. One of my first mistakes was thinking that we would, as humans, know everything about these remote places, and the unknown beings that of course inhabit them. Consider this a cautionary tale for any one of you that decide to go on solo hikes. You are not alone, and you are not even close to the scariest thing out there. I set out early Monday morning from base camp, which was a small campground just outside the park boundaries. From there, I was to drive down this old logging road for about 25 kilometers, then park my car and start my hike. According to the maps and info I had searched up online on some forums, there was only one way up into the hills, and it would take me about a full day's hike to get up there. From there, I was to follow an old, deactivated logging road for about 10 kilometres, then cut off and start trekking straight up the hills. According to my notes, there was a path there, but the undergrowth was so rampant after the fire that it could possibly be bushed over. The hiking was mostly uneventful, except for the fact that I ended up giving minor first aid to an older man who was totally out of his element this far out. Just as I rounded a switchback, I noticed the man looked pale and disorientated. There was definitely something medically wrong with the guy. From a distance, he looked really uncomfortable. He was sitting perfectly still, with weirdly perfect posture, considering he was sitting on a fallen log. As I approached closer, it was very apparent that this man was totally disorientated and out of his element. Even as I walked within several feet of him, he didn't even greet me or even acknowledge my existence. It wasn't until I touched him on his clammy shoulder that he turned to face me. The look on his face I can only describe by likening it to that of a 100-yard stare that you see in some people who have experienced, well, trauma. Despite him looking me directly in the eye, there was no recognition. It was like he looked right past me. Despite all this, I gave the man some water and cleaned out a small wound on his leg. I did all this without him saying a word, for or against me, even helping him. After I got him all patched up, I tried to get him to come back to the trailhead with me. There's no way I'm going to leave this guy alone in this state. After that, things started getting kind of weird. Before I could even react, the man took off up the trail and around a switchback. This wouldn't be totally abnormal, except for the fact that they took off heading up the mountain, instead of back to the trailhead. Fearing that he was more disorientated than I previously suspected, I left my lunch and ran up the hill after him. I turned the corner of the switchback and he was gone, literally into thin air. There was no way that an older guy could have rounded the second switchback by the time I'd got to the first one. But I checked anyways. Nothing. He had just vanished. Starting to panic a bit, my search and rescue training kicked in, and I started combing the area for any sign of him. I found absolutely nothing. No footprints, broken branches, or any sign that anyone had been up this trail for any time in the past month at least. Upon going back to the part of the trail where I first saw him, there was only one set of footprints around the log he sat on. Mine. At this point, I was thoroughly confused and, to be honest, a little spooked. I'm not sure what my confused brain was thinking, but I decided to summit the hill instead of going back for help. I think my logic was the fact I was more than 3/4 up the hill, and that there would be a self-service at the top to phone for help. There wasn't. By the time I had reached the summit, there was no way I was going back down in one day. I wasn't thinking the smartest, but even I knew hiking in the dark was just asking for something bad to happen. I decided that I would hike back down at the crack of dawn tomorrow morning and notify the authorities about the missing man. I set up camp, took some photos, made dinner, and fell asleep almost immediately. About halfway through the night, things started getting increasingly more fucked up. According to my watch, it was shortly after 1 AM. I was confused as to why I woke up, as I usually sleep through the night after long hikes, unless there was some critter or something poking around. What confused me even more was the fact that I knew that animals, specifically larger, scarier ones, didn't usually inhabit this far up the mountain. You see, there's not enough food or something. Upon becoming slightly less groggy, I could hear what I thought was an animal noises behind the range. I could easily discern what was making the noise. As time passed, roughly 10 minutes or so. The noise was getting louder, and whatever was making the noise was getting closer. Coyotes have been known to make noises akin to the screaming of children, but I have not, and probably will never, hear another noise like that I heard on the mountain that very night. Whatever was making this noise came within proper earshot, and I nearly froze upon hearing clearly what the noise was. Whatever out there was speaking English, or at least attempting to. Every 10 seconds or so I would hear what sounded like whispering, except that it was loud enough to be heard from several meters away. Help me, 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 help me. Whatever was out there didn't seem to have a firm grasp on the small intricacies of the English language. Even repetition of those words just sounded like a parrot or something non-human, attempting to just replicate human speech. It had the wording down, but the cadence and rhythm was totally off. In addition to that, someone calling for help doesn't whisper for help. At this point, I was totally and mentally effed up. My heart was racing, and I was so scared I literally couldn't move. Minute by minute, the whispers grew closer, but didn't increase in volume. Just as it sounded like whatever the fuck was out there was directly outside the tent, the whispers quit, and there was total silence on top of the mountain for an agonizing minute. Then something I will never forget happened. From right outside my tent, a woman's voice. "Hello? I'm lost on top of this mountain. Can you help me find a way down?" From then on, pure adrenaline kicked in. In one fluid motion, I got up, turned my headlamp on, grabbed my axe and ran through the tent door. Just at the distance where my headlamp wouldn't give me enough light to see properly, stood the man from earlier. He was just standing there, right outside my range of vision. As I took a step closer, he took a stiff, twitchy step backwards. All that I remember is me yelling absolute gibberish at the top of my lungs and yelling for whatever it was to get the fuck out of here. About what seemed like minutes of yelling at the top of my lungs, it sprinted right out of my lamp range. When it ran, it seemed to cover several meters per step and was gone in an instant. For the rest of the night, I never heard or saw anything, but spent the 3 hours until daylight sitting up in my tent, clutching my axe. As soon as the sun peaked above the mountain, I grabbed my bag and I left. For all I know, my tent is still up there. All I know is that I won't be going back for it. If you're ever hiking alone, be careful. Things in the backcountry aren't always what they seem. I don't hike alone anymore, and rarely without a rifle. I've got lots of stories about the places where people don't go, and the bad things that happen. Most of them are from my younger years. Maybe, just maybe, I'll get around to writing them. Wow, I hope you guys enjoyed that story. That was an absolutely creepy night, I'm sure, for that man to endure on that mountain, completely desolate, on your own, and definitely without a doubt out of reach of any type of help anytime soon. Please do let me know what you think down below in the comments, guys. I hope you've had a great weekend and enjoying your time off from the hustle and bustle of work. Please do like and share. And also, guys, remember, be safe, not sorry.